Welcome to EdUp Curriculum. I am your host, Nicole Poff. I'm really excited about today's conversation. I know I always say that, but today we're going to talk about some of the stuff that I think is vital in today's kind of ever-changing higher ed landscape. So to help us with this conversation, we have Dr. Russ Frohardt. Russ, thank you so much for being here. Before we begin, can you introduce yourself to the audience? You have a pretty wide background starting in Catholic schools to where you are now. So who are you? What do you want the audience to know?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. This is super fun to talk about. So, my name's Russ Frohardt. I'm currently serving as the provost and vice president for academics here at Schreiner University in Kerrville, Texas, which is a small liberal arts university out in the hill country of Central Texas. I just completed my 8th week here on the job, so I'm still pretty new, but I really love this university and this place. It's fantastic. Before this, I served as a dean for academics and an interim vice president at Northwest Vista College in San Antonio, which is about 45 minutes away from here, in the Alamo Colleges system. So it's a 5-college community college system that serves about 80,000 students there. And NVC was hovering around 21,000 when I left. So served a big part of a growing city there in San Antonio. And before I went there in 2016, I had multiple roles at St. Edward's University, which is, as you mentioned, a private Catholic university in Austin, Texas, that is roughly 5,000-ish students and has a mix of liberal arts and graduate education. And so I was faculty there. I was on the psychology faculty. I'm trained as a behavioral neuroscientist, and I collaborated with lots of folks, including my wife, who teaches at Southwestern University, which is up the road in Georgetown, and lots of other scientists and leaders and collaborators in the Central Texas region. So I've been at this since 2003, when I finished up a postdoc at Dartmouth in New Hampshire.
So you've been kind of everywhere, which is awesome because you're going to give a lot of different insights here. Before we get to kind of where you are now, I want to skip back in time a little bit because you come from a school, at least when I look on the website for your previous school, it seems like there's really a strong like trade technical program offerings, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is where a lot of colleges are trying to go right now, right? They're trying to grow to that trade space. What lessons do you have coming kind of out of that area? What lessons do you have for people who are thinking, do we want to go more kind of employer aligned curriculum, skills based? What lessons do you have for them? Advice.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I did come from a pretty traditional training as a scientist, and then up through a pretty traditional, even though it's a master's comprehensive university at St. Ed's, moving to the space where there's the terms we use is transfer. So about 85% of the students at Northwest Vista are really looking to transfer to a university when they're finished. So they want to follow a degree, pretty traditional. And then there's 10 to 15% of the programs that are career and technical education, or CTE. So those are some people call them vocational, or like you said, employer aligned. So it's a little bit more of a direct line between I'm getting this training to do this job.
Yep.
So I think a lot of people don't understand what those programs are like. They get labeled like vocational, or they kind of get a stigma of being less than, when a lot of them are really fantastic pathways to great careers. I inherited them when we did a reorganization. So I was over arts and sciences, and then Alamo reorganized for some pathways stuff. And I ended up with the STEM disciplines on the transfer side. And then I got all of the CTE programs. So 15 programs that I had to kind of learn how they operate and what they do. And we had a really robust group of IT programs, so cloud computing and cybersecurity and network administration. And the folks that were finishing those programs were going into industry and making, $80 to $100,000 with an associate's degree. So it's really hard to argue that
Yeah.
it's not a good route to take, even though some of those programs were um, shared with computer science, which is the more traditional track that tracks off to the 4-year institution. But we also started a 4-year bachelor's degree in cloud computing that just got launched last year and accredited. So trying to back to your question about should people go into that space? Yeah, I think so. I think we need to, as folks in higher education, and especially the folks you have on this show that really understand curriculum design, that we need to kind of get rid of some of those fake distinctions. So um, a lot of folks that want to take a program that allows them to get an associate of applied science don't have a path to go to the next thing. So that's one of the reasons why we created the bachelor degree. But also there are some BAAS degrees in the region. So some through like Western Governors or Texas A&M San Antonio, and they're just rare. So to tell our students if they want to continue their education or upskill, that it's tough to do. So coming here now to Schreiner, it's a nice mix of that because we have some pathways through the non-credit side of things. So where folks can take classes in real estate and mechatronics and some programs that are not for credit that can either get them a certification that will help with them with employment or find a pathway into one of our 4 credit programs, which is similar to what we were doing at Alamo. So I think that's the future, kind of trying to blur those lines and figure out how we serve the community needs and the employer needs. And I know there's a lot of debate in legislatures and lots of higher ed bodies trying to make the direct connections because getting a degree in something like history or philosophy or art, sometimes people don't see the connection to how that makes you a good employee. Whereas these CTE programs, it's a really easy line to draw. So I think we need to get better at all of it, making the connections between the dots, but also getting rid of some of those false distinctions about whether that education is really useful and important, because it is for sure.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much to unpack there. It's really easy, and I use easy lightly because there's a lot of work that goes into it. But if you're at a technical college and let's say there's a medical assisting program,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of A to B, right? Students start school, 9 months later, they have a certificate, and then there is a medical assisting job, right? It's like point A to point B, and then the technical school, if they have a good career center, can really show strong job outcomes, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
the most direct path you can possibly have. And they're under, in my opinion, really strict kind of guidelines, right? Like their accreditors oftentimes expect 80% job placements, whereas us in the traditional worlds, we're like, we don't know our job outcomes, we think
Yeah,
our
we don't
students,
really measure it. Yeah.
we don't. And we would argue that that's not the purpose of maybe higher ed as we traditionally have thought about it, right? Maybe there's a lot of other reasons why students go to college, which is also true. So I think you're right in that the sense that there's a lot of fuzziness between 4-year degrees and even associate's degrees to those technical colleges. But I don't know if you're seeing this. I feel like the student has changed. And, when students went to four-year colleges maybe 20 years ago, it was maybe more of a parental expectation, right? And so we had
Hmm.
the students who could go through versus now I'm seeing more students who want to know, I'm putting in 4 years, I'm putting in 80,000. Will this job lead to, or will this degree lead to a job?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you nailed it in that the history of higher ed, was to really create people that were well-rounded and kind of renaissance, and that served a lot of the employment in a different time. The time became more specialized, and
Yep.
we've shifted the way that we do education, but we still have these, I keep calling them false distinctions, right? Kind of these siloed versions of how education happens. So you can get technical training, you can get training from employers directly, you
Mm-hmm.
can get training online. Um, the degrees and certificates and micro credentials, and some of those things are not. So, like ACE tried to put together a grouping of credentials that they can set a standard for. Because right now it's a little bit the wild, wild west for micro credentials, right? So
Yep.
if I take these small courses that I pay for, but they're not credit bearing with an institution, do they count? And so folks like ACE are trying to say, we think they count for these things. Uh, but like in those IT programs that I was talking about, Microsoft and AWS, they say this this credential, I know you know how to do this thing, so I can give you a job, right?
Yep.
Or you can upskill and get a promotion. And we don't have like a clearinghouse for all of those things. So it gets really confusing and can become predatory, right? We've seen that too, where folks say, take my course for $50,000 and you're going to get a job without really any labor market or
Yep.
measurement, or accrediting body behind it. And so folks are like, yeah, that sounds great, and dump a bunch of money into maybe something that they're not going to really get an outcome for. So I think a lot of folks are struggling with where to take this. I think we can just be better partners with each other. We started a PTech, so the model is like an early college, high school for technical disciplines, and we started that in Bernie when I was at my other college, and it was in cybersecurity. So the families and the students were like, "Yeah, I want to get trained in cybersecurity, and I can get an associate's degree as I finish high school, right?"
Mm.
And at really no cost. So that's a great deal. The confusion was every time I would go to parent night is that the parents that were then okay, they have an associate's degree, so they can transfer over to UTSA as a junior. It's like no, because it's a CTE program, they'll only take 15 hours that count for core. And it's like, what? But it's a
Yep.
degree. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, not all degrees are the same. So it's that kind of language and those kinds of distinctions that I think we just have to get better at figuring out a methodology or a way to count them or give them value that everyone understands. I know that we worked on a credit for prior learning process
Mm.
at our district that tries to do some of that really well. And I know a lot of different institutions and organizations that are trying to do that. But it's hard when you're asking a whole bunch of people to share, and when there's money involved, it's really hard.
Yeah. And there's accreditors involved. I mean,
That's right.
it's,
Different standards.
I think if nothing else, we've established that this is a really messy process, right? There's really no like straight line to how schools should do this. I think too, I love your idea of partnerships, partnering with, I mean, beyond high schools, partnering with the employers, partnering with the students. Like,
Yeah.
there's, I think, probably not a popular opinion. I think higher ed, we're a little bit too self sufficient, meaning we rely exclusively on our faculty. to develop the content that they think is appropriate for the
Hmm.
students, and we rely exclusively on that. And that is where we design our courses, and that's where we design our programs and all of it, right? Like
Yeah.
we look to ourselves, but I think you're right in that we should be looking outwards here.
Well, that dual credit model, so I mentioned the P-TECH and early college high school. So that's kind of a whole package as a degree. But when I was at NVC, most of our students that were in dual credit are just taking a class or two at a time. And that's great. You get a head start on taking college classes. The dual part is the hard part. So you have the K through 12 state agency. Here it's the TEA that oversees all the curriculum and what they think is important for education in public high schools. And then you have a college, a public college, coming in and saying, well, here's what we think is important for this subject matter. And it's being taught at the same place to the same student. And
Yeah.
so there's like arguments about learning outcomes and what counts and what's the college standard. And that's where these partnerships are really important. You have to really agree on policies and outcomes and how does it best serve the student. Because back to your question about whether we think students are coming to train for a job, they do. And
Hmm.
their families definitely do think that they're going to come and get trained for a job. And if we're not meeting that need, then they don't see the value of higher education. And that's totally fair. We should be better at talking about it and measuring it for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that right now I think we're, as an industry, realizing that, right? That the public distrust maybe is a little bit higher than we would like it to be, right? You can go on Instagram and pay $7 for a marketing course that guarantees a six-figure salary. And they're like, "Oh, this is cool, $7. I got $7."
Yeah.
Or and then you call an enrollment advisor and they're like, how about you spend 4 years and get a marketing degree from us for $80,000, right? It's like, how do we compete with that, and
Yeah.
how do we keep ourselves relevant when you have an AI chatbot in your pocket now that's like your own personal assistant that can walk you through kind of any area of,
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
area of life. How do we compete with that? It's wild.
Yeah. There's always been lumpers and splitters. So how do I think we drifted towards splitting into all these specialized disciplines. I'm a behavioral neuroscientist. Like I'm a subdivision of a subdivision of an area of really, two or three different areas. And so, my research, it really is understood by like 10 people, you know? And so, and I think that happens a lot within academia. So the conversation then is, well, how do we make it more accessible? And I think people who are really good teachers and instructors find those ways. They find those stories, how to relate the stuff that's important as a subject matter expert back to your life, right? So
Yep.
if I'm studying a chemical that affects a receptor in your brain that does a thing, why should you care about that? Well, that affects memory. Memory is how you live. Memory is really important for all these disorders and clinical issues. So you have to be able to tell that story really well. I think a bunch of us in higher ed have gotten bad at storytelling.
Oh yeah.
I'm very fortunate to work for a president who has a doctorate in storytelling. Basically, he's he's an English professor, but he specializes in folklore and storytelling, and it really is a gift to be able to communicate difficult things to understand to folks so that they're like, oh, I get it, and then they can get behind it or make an informed decision about what to do next.
Absolutely. And you're right that, we're not communicating to students why things matter. I started in higher ed in career services,
Hmm.
and students would graduate and they would come to me and they would say, "I'm looking at this job description. I don't have any of these. I don't have any of these skills." And I'm like,
Yeah.
critical thinking is one of these skills. You literally just spent 4 years,
Yeah.
and I would have to talk about what about the case studies that you did, right? And they just did not see how what they were doing transferred outside of the classroom walls, right? And I was like, they don't get it. And it's not to their fault, truly not a fault of their own, right? Especially if you're a first gen student, if you don't have that parent kind of modeling and guiding you through job search and all the important parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see how you get to a job description and you're like, "Ooh, I don't have any of these." If your school never told you these are going to be vital for the workplace.
Or we call them something different, right? So to your point, we worked on a project that never quite got fully realized. So a lot of schools, and there's a bunch of vendors out there that do e-portfolios, and
Mhm.
so part of it is so that you can take work with you, especially if you're in like graphic design and website design and things like that, or art. And we adopted a version of that at Alamo, and part of what we were thinking about was can we take what we do for assessment. So you said things like critical thinking. Well, the state requires that critical thinking and communication are learning outcomes of every course that we offer, and there's four others that make up the core, in addition to the disciplinary outcomes. So if you have a student with an e-portfolio and
Yep.
you say, you just took four classes, you just got that much closer times four in critical thinking because it's an outcome of this course that you just took, then it's like a meter or a dashboard or a game, and they can see, oh, I'm actually getting better at teamwork and critical thinking and communication because those are things I'm learning in each one of these classes. So then when they come see you for career advice, you say,
Yep.
how many times have you learned about critical thinking? And they go, 60 times,
Yeah.
or this many hours I have credit for. And then it's like, well, then you can, I would say that you're at a mastery level for that thing. And but we don't talk about it that way. We just say you take a course and you get a grade, and it's part of this degree program. And at the end, you should be able to go get a job.
Absolutely. I worked with a school and we did an e-portfolio and we used a specific tool that allowed students to use hashtags. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
on the assignment, the professor would suggest hashtags that they can use, right? Like this assignment is building hashtag critical thinking, hashtag problem solving. And the idea was at the end, your final submission was an upload to your e-portfolio with the hashtags that you thought were, demonstrated in that assignment. So very similar concept. And what we also learned there was when e-portfolios were used to basically just a dumping ground, which I think there was kind of
Sure.
this mass shift of we need e-portfolios. When I would do audits, I'm like, these kids are in pajamas recording a video for their future employment, or there's stacks of laundry behind them, right? Or there's a kid hitting
Yeah.
them in the head. Because in their mind it was just for school,
Just for class. Yeah.
and so I think there's so much you can do with e-portfolios, even if people say they're not really relevant anymore. I think, yes, there are industries where they're still very relevant, but I think it solves this kind of awareness gap, right? This like students aren't aware of the skills that they're building. And this is a very tangible way, like you said, where they can kind of start keeping a catalog of all the times that they've demonstrated each and every skill versus it living in their brain.
Yeah, and it is something like the gamification is definitely something they're used to, right? So everybody that makes an app or a game or a widget has a gem or cash or some sort of currency that you can build up because you want people to spend time on that thing. Why not do that with skills, right? So I'm
Yep.
accruing these skills so that I can power up my career or whatever
Absolutely.
the gaming is.
Uh, so I'm obsessed with Reddit. I
Okay.
never participate in Reddit, but I love to see what students are saying on Reddit. So if you haven't looked at your school's Reddit, I would go see if you guys have students there talking. But
Yeah.
the Reddit thread that I am obsessed with is Western governors.
Uh-huh.
Obsessed. I'm obsessed with their Reddit because it is so active, and they have gamified the interaction that students have with their college so much. Students can earn points for, like, with their time in the class on the app. They earn these like owl bucks, I think is what they're called. They might
Sure.
not be called owl bucks. And then they turn them in for swag,
Yeah.
school
Yeah. Yeah.
swag,
Yeah.
right? They can buy, there's like a blanket that all of them want. And so they save their points for this Western Governor's blanket. Um, they're obsessed with this like confetti. Like, I guess when you get close to graduation, your app has confetti, and so it's like a magical moment that is hyped. But it's like all you're doing is gamifying this, and your students are so engaged. It's wild.
Well, especially for, I mean, I think that's really important for an online university. And they have some really brilliant, innovative ways of addressing some of these issues that we're talking about. So I've seen them at conferences talking about even their faculty structure. So, they have some instruction faculty, they have some assessment faculty. We don't think of it that way in traditional higher ed. And
Mm-mm.
it serves them well for what they're doing, right? I mean, I don't want to discount a lot of students that come here to Schreiner are athletes. So almost 50% of our students are athletes,
Oh wow.
right? And so they play a Division III varsity sport, and that's a huge part of what makes up the college experience for them.
Yep.
And then figuring out how to manage the time and how to do other things to incorporate into their education, into the community. So I definitely don't want to make it all about just counting widgets, and making sure
Yep.
that you get enough so that you can go out and get a job and work forever and ever. College is a great time to do lots of interesting and cool things, and we definitely want to enrich that experience too. And I think that's why Western Governors has put a lot of resources into that, because they don't have that campus experience,
Yep.
right? They don't have they're not in a fraternity necessarily, or hanging out on the quad with friends and things like that. So creating the community in other ways is really important.
Absolutely. And I think you just made a really important distinction. So I'm finishing up my PhD.
Oh,
I
congratulations.
Thank you. This was my first semester where all of my classes were exclusively online. There was no ground classes offered. I go to Kansas State. I
Uh-huh.
love going to campus. I love it. I love sitting in class. I love seeing all the students. I call them kids. I love it so much. This semester, I've never felt more disconnected from
Yeah.
the school. And I was not motivated to log in. I was not motivated to do anything
Yeah.
because I wasn't going there all the time. And I think, to your point, when we start to sway too far, we really miss those campus experiences, which, especially in your guys' case, that could be selling points for students who are,
Oh, for
traditional.
sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of the experience that I think a lot of students and their families want for them when they go off to college is, grow up a little bit more and have all the experiences and meet new people. That's fantastic. And while online education offers a lot of things like accessibility and like programs like yours that are hybrid or can move fully online, that also requires you as a student to be really good with your time and motivated to log in,
Yeah.
and for instructors to make space for you to be able to talk to them and talk to your peers. Otherwise, you're just kind of on this solo journey that is, for most people, doesn't feel super rewarding.
No, I hated it. Literally, this was my worst semester. But according to them, this is the direction that most students want. They're saying that based on feedback, a lot of their students want online classes now, and so they're moving more and more in that direction.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of the PhD folks have other jobs and lots of other things pulling on their time. So I
Yep.
do get the accessibility part of it. It's just not easy to curate that experience so that it's meaningful and rewarding in the same way that a face-to-face class is.
Absolutely. Which kind of leads me to my next question. So, when we first chatted, you Something you'd said really kind of sparked my interest, which was curriculum often doesn't respond quickly enough. And I thought, yes, I agree. So let's kind of dig into that. What do you think holds us back? And then how do we fix that? How do we start building curriculum that does respond quickly enough?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So back to your earlier question of what was it like working in career and technical education? So all of those programs are required by the state to have an advisory board, and they have to be people in the industry. A lot of them have advanced degrees or tons of experience in whatever the program is serving, whether it's a, a personal trainer program or a pharmacy tech program or an IT program. They had to have gone out and done that thing and gotten their own credentials and experience and come back to teach it and then be advised by other people who are out in the industry right now working with clients and working with other collaborators and employers and employees. So they have to meet at least once a year, usually two or three times a year, and the the directors and the faculty that work in those programs have to respond to that advisory board in a meaningful way, because if you don't, you become irrelevant really quickly. So I like that model, and we've tried to adopt that model. Like here for our engineering program, we have an advisory board for the engineering program. So things that change quickly, again, I'm in neuroscience, that stuff changes all the time. And if you're still doing the way that we did it 20 years ago, you're completely irrelevant. But even 6 months to a year ago, if you haven't made those changes, then you can't say your program is training people for what they need out in the careers that they're going to want. So I think that's one option or one opportunity that we have to do more holistically across the higher ed space. Definitely collaborating across multiple different kinds of institutions and types and modalities, I think is really important. Some of the things that we talked about earlier about understanding the labor force. So again, those career and technical education programs. Well, if you want to start a new one, you have to make a case that the jobs are needed.
Yep.
And so if you do that with a more traditional kind of arts and sciences program, I mean, it's a good idea to do that, but it's typically not a requirement at most colleges and universities. So what need are you filling? I feel like Schreiner does a really good job because we have a mix of that. So we have a really strong nursing program because there's lots of needs for healthcare in the area. We're building out our engineering program because there's good engineering jobs in this sector and in this part of the state. We started an aviation program, which our president was really hesitant to start because of a lot of these reasons. Are there going to be jobs? How do we sustain it? How do we get the people to teach it? And once we solve those problems, there's a big need for pilots out in this, in the rural parts of America. And then it's a pathway to better jobs in being a pilot, but also just in aviation in general. So I feel like we're getting a little bit better. At least, I'm new. Like I said, I'm new, but I feel like we do a pretty good job of that here. And how do you do that with bigger institutions and with institutions that are public? So for me to launch the bachelor program that I mentioned, I mean, I had to get permission from within. I work with the faculty to help build the curriculum that had to go through our process, that then had to go through our system process, that then had to go to the state, that had to go through our accreditor. And then, then you get the resources, then you recruit the students, and then the accreditor comes and checks and makes sure that you're doing what you're doing. And so, I mean, that visit just happened last week for a program that we tried to start like 3 years ago. So that's just not fast enough,
Nope.
right? Can you imagine someone who started an AI program 3 years ago? People would have been like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to work on that? And now it's like, if you don't have it integrated into your programs, you're being left behind. So yeah, we need to figure out some better systems to integrate those shifts because things are shifting rapidly in our world.
Absolutely. And you're right. The process takes so long to get new programs approved. You know, even within my company, we will get a new client and they're like, okay, yeah, we just got this program approved. And then I'm looking at the course blueprints and I'm like, these courses were written 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we building these? And they're like, oh, we just got it approved. It took 4 years. So then I'm like, okay, so
Wow. Yeah.
this is marketing, and so a lot of this is obsolete. And you're right, that system we can't sustain it with how quickly the world is moving. Our students are moving fast, the world is moving fast, and it feels like higher ed. We're like little turtles, you know, getting our way through life. But something else that I want to touch on that you mentioned was how you guys looked outward to figure out what you guys needed. And I think that kind of brings us back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Is you guys, a lot of higher ed has this kind of build it and they will come mentality. They're
Yeah.
like, we are going to build a top notch DNP program and the
Mm-hmm.
students will come. They build it, they spend all the time building the curriculum, marketing it, and then it's like crickets because they didn't seek that external validation first.
Yeah, and some of those partners, I mean, some of that is personality driven too. So, you can have a robust program that's doing all the things you want it to do, and then maybe you have a shift in faculty or leadership of a partner, or maybe a partner now disappears, and then it's tenuous. So, you want to make sure that your partners are diverse and hopefully everyone is stable and sustainable. But yeah, I mean, I unfortunately had to close down a couple of programs at my last college because um, they weren't sustainable with the people and the resources that we had, and it's unfortunate. And we got to take care of all the students and the faculty and teach it out, but I think some of those programs could have been and maybe need to be reinvented um, in light of the changes that have happened in those sectors.
Yeah, that's never easy to close programs. But
No, that's not why anybody gets into this job, I don't think.
no, that's a tough one because you know how many people are getting impacted. But so you've seen examples where I'm going to go back to kind of this faculty driven curriculum
Hmm.
model. You've seen successful examples because I think this is something that higher ed still struggles with is if we bring in outside perspective, who how do we balance the employer insights, the industry insights with the faculty owning the curriculum, right? We kind of
Yeah.
assume that there's going to be this tension of who owns the curriculum and how do we develop that. What makes these partnership works? Advisory boards and then faculty. How does this look in practice?
Yeah, I think you have to pull back the veil and reveal some of the stuff that has been secret, not secret, but I mean, people don't want to give away their advantage in the market, right? So I think about a meeting that a bunch of higher ed folks had with USAA, which is one of the biggest employers in San Antonio, and also an insurance company that is the biggest employer of cybersecurity personnel in the region, which I think most people don't think of that when they think of insurance. Like,
Yeah.
why would I work as a cybersecurity employee in? But of course, they need lots of security, lots of sensitive data, hacking, all the things, right? And a bunch of us were in that space meeting with their leadership, and they pulled back the veil a little bit. They said, here's what we do, here's how we hire, these are our struggle points and challenges. We want to work with you because we need good people. There aren't enough of them trained. And here's what we'd like. Train them up to this point, which might not be comfortable for you because that means they might not complete a degree.
Hmm.
They might not hit the metric that you use for success. And then we want them to come over to us, and we're going to finish training them in the way that makes the most sense for us, because we have them something specific we need them to do.
Yeah.
And that is really uncomfortable for folks. And like you said, the tension. Well, now I don't get my credit for them getting a credential.
Yep.
It looks like they left early. Um, and I talked to some folks at a conference a couple years ago at Pima in Arizona. They had built the same kind of thing, but even with the not for credit classes. And a bunch of the leadership was like, well, all these students are leaving the program early. Like, that's not good. And he's like,
Yep.
but they're leaving for jobs. They're
Yes.
leaving for
Yeah.
really good jobs. Isn't that winning? Like, isn't that what we're supposed to do? So I think some of back to your question about things that we can do is we can design better metrics for what success looks like in higher
Yep.
ed. So really, following those students out and seeing what their lives are like, bringing that back and incorporating them into programs, making sure that their training's not obsolete, but also just not making it about points for, I retained this many students from this year to this year, or I graduated this many students and got this many credentials. I'm not saying those things need to go away. I think they need to be couched in, well, there's another part of that story.
Yep.
And that needs to count for something. Otherwise, we're just going to keep the system's going to do what it's built for. It's just going to keep churning out the same kinds of results if we don't change the things that we care about and measure.
Absolutely. I was on a site visit a while back, and a faculty member was talking to me about very similar situation to that. He said, a lot of our program is very internship dependent, and so our students are out in the field
Yeah.
interning, and then they get offered jobs, great jobs, and they haven't finished their degree. And he's like, and I, as a faculty member, cannot in good conscience say, turn down that job and finish your degree.
Yeah.
I tell them, stop school and go take that job, right? And he's like, and I
Yeah.
know that that's not, he's like, it feels like that's not what I should be saying, because when you
Yeah.
look at our metrics, when the accreditor comes to visit, there's no space for that story. There's no column. It's, did your student complete or not complete? And then did they get a job at the end of the completion, right? It's like
Yeah.
start, finish, job. And so
Well,
when students get jobs in between, how do we account for that?
yeah. I mean, there are some good models. There are some earn and learn programs. St. Philip's has a great partnership with Toyota in San Antonio, where students go to class and work on their program in manufacturing, and then they also spend 2 days a week on the floor in a manufacturing plant, right? So it's expected that, yes, you're going to complete your credential. It might take a little bit more time, but you're also building a really important relationship with the person who's going to be your employer.
Yeah.
So I know that's not available in every industry. The story you just told reminded me very much of nursing programs. I mean, they're really heavily dependent on internships and clinicals and preceptorships. And it's a great way to get to know the folks in your region and get the experience that you need as a nurse, and also a job down the
Yeah.
road. And what I really like about the nursing pathway, I've learned a lot here. We have a really good nursing program that goes all the way from a licensed vocational nurse through RN. We just proposed an associate's degree. We have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. So we have the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
So students come in and out, right? So they'll get a credential, they'll work for a while, come back and maybe want to add to their credential, or get a leadership position in nursing. So I really like that model, as you keep working and keep educating yourself in a career path that has a lot of need. We're never going to have enough nurses in the way our healthcare system is. So how do you replicate that in something that's like business or nonprofits or psychology? They all have their little quirks, but I think we could borrow some of those best practices maybe and put them in other pathways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned, students returning, right? Which kudos to you guys because a lot of schools don't have their students returning. Maybe the students had such a not great experience the first time around that
Yeah,
when it comes time to advance, they're like, not going back there. So it's a good testament to the school, right? When
for
when alumni
sure.
return, and that's a great pipeline, right? Especially if you have kind of all the levels, you're like, you can start down here and sky's the limit with us.
Yeah.
But they have to have a good experience all the time. And something I really appreciated about you the first time we talked, I was talking about how people loved Kansas State. Everyone is in purple all the time. And
Uh-huh.
you being in Texas, we're talking about how everyone's in orange, right? And there's this flagship university, but that's not what you guys are trying to do. Like you're not trying to mimic University of Texas.
Hmm.
Instead, you're really trying to serve the local community, right? And I think you said what the University of the Hill Country is what you guys are
That's
trying
right.
to, yeah, that's what you guys are known for. How do
Uh-huh.
you resist that temptation though? How do you stay true to we're going to be this hub and not want to be University of Texas?
Yeah, I think it's more about knowing what they do and also collaborating. So I have great colleagues that work at the University of Texas. So being able to set up partnerships with them benefits my students, right? And it benefits their students. And I don't want us to have to, I mean, me personally, I don't want to have to try to get a $5 million grant every couple of years to be viable as a faculty member.
Yep.
But that's not to say some people aren't great at that and have amazing uh, research programs that get great funding and have that's what they do. We don't do that. So we have research, we have great research. It has to be accessible to undergraduate students. It has to help be a part of the learning process. And of course, there's overlap, right? Those Venn diagrams overlap. I went to a big flagship university and I got that experience as an undergrad, but not everybody did.
Mhm.
And at a place like Shriner, it's really an expectation. You should be doing all of the extracurricular, co-curricular things that are offered to you because that's part of the experience. That's part of what hopefully attracted you to a place like this. So I do. I mean, I'm as competitive as they come. Ask anybody that I play basketball with, and they will tell you I'm crazy. But I don't see UT as a competitor. I really see them as colleagues and partners. And I know we're vying for a lot of the same students, even down the road. Many of our colleagues, Incarnate Word and St. Mary's and Trinity. There's lots of other smaller schools that we know that those students apply there and here, and
Yep.
we're all going to be okay. but we can't beat each other over the head and not collaborate on things. And it's super fun to collaborate on grants and activities and bridge programs and outreach to K through 12 students and things like that. So, I mean, I think that's another part is really partnering with other people in education. The K through 12 space here in Texas have been amazing partners with me at every part of my journey as a faculty member and as an administrator. So uh, my complaint is always that professors get trained to be an expert in a field, and then we don't teach them how to be teachers. And people in K through 12 are trained to be educators, and
Yep.
so we definitely need to learn a lot from them.
Oh yeah. There's I know we're almost out of time, but there's I learned so much K through 12, like through our K through 12 educators. I was at a conference and they said behavior is communication. That's something we preach over and over and over again. I was a behavioral therapist, so I love that perspective. That's my jam
Yeah,
is,
that's brilliant.
behavior. But that was like their motto. And it was so, I mean, just ingrained in everything they do. Behavior is communication. The way that your students are behaving in the class, they're communicating things to you. And I'm like, oh, we need to take this to higher ed. We need to move this up a level because we need our faculty to see, right, how students are behaving in their class. They're communicating something to them, whether it's silence. What are they communicating in the silence? What are they communicating when they all turn in their paper late? What are they communicating when they all fail their test, right?
That's
Like
right. That's right.
all the behaviors are ways in which our students are communicating, but we don't think about it that way. But K through 12 does.
And I would argue, having worked with a lot of people in the enrollment management space, you can extend that to those behave. So if you put a class on the books and students aren't taking it, they're telling you something.
Yep, totally.
Or, if you've shifted the modality, or I mean, when we say things like, well, we don't know what they want. Yeah, you do.
Yeah,
They
they're
just told you they don't want that version.
they're telling,
Um,
yeah. Or like career services, right? If your career services is only there 8 to 5 and
yeah,
all the students are missing appointments or they're not showing up for appointments,
because they work.
they, yeah, what is the behavior telling you and how can we adjust accordingly?
Yeah,
Yeah, that needs to be a higher ed mantra because I think just by looking at how students behave, we could learn a lot.
yeah. I think that should be the new mantra of your podcast: behavior
I'm gonna
communication.
make I'm gonna make a bumper sticker. I'm gonna make a computer sticker that says behavior is communication, and everyone can get a sticker for their computer. And then
There
that
you
way, when
go.
they're frustrated about how students are acting, we're like, what can we take from this?
Yeah,
Okay, I know you have to go. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. This has been a
yeah.
lot of fun. Um, I can't wait. I'm going to have you back on in a year or so, and I want
All
to
right.
hear how things are going. I really appreciate kind of your balance of protecting the institution and all the things we love with staying relevant with industry needs. I think your approach is very gentle and kind, and so I can't wait to see what you guys continue to do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation, the conversation. I wish you the best of luck finishing up your program,
Thank
and
you.
I'll be tuning into your podcast to hear more.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you all so much for listening. We will see you next time.